Welcome to Inside the Skev, and I'm your host, Aaron Masliansky. Today we're here with Nina Barrett from Bookends and Beginnings, which is a local bookstore here in Evanston, and it's a really cool place, and so happy to have Nina here. So thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for asking me.
You're welcome. You're pretty well known around town, I guess now, and because you have a really special place. Can you tell us a little bit about your store?
Sure. Well, we have just turned 5 years old. The space that we're in is a space that a lot of people knew for a very long time as Bookman's Alley, because
Right.
there was an antiquarian bookstore there for about 40 years. That was owned by Roger Carlson, and he specialized in essentially antique, rare, hard-to-find books. He went out of business at the end of 2013, and we knew that the space was becoming available. And I came to Evanston in 1985, and I have to say I had always kind of had this kind of bookstore in my head. And I wondered, actually, at the time, why Evanston has always had a number of small independent bookstores.
Yeah.
But in terms of having a real substantial general interest independent bookstore, there really wasn't anything like that at that time. And then, of course, Barnes & Noble arrived, and then
Right.
Borders arrived, and then Amazon arrived. So there were a lot of years when I would never have tried to open a store like this.
Did you ever work at a bookstore before?
Yes, I had quite a bit of experience. So I originally actually came to Evanston to go to Northwestern and get a graduate degree in journalism.
Okay.
Ironically, one of the very first stories I wrote when I was in the journalism program was a story about Bookman's Alley and Roger Carlson.
No way.
So I was very aware of the space since 1985. And so then I spent about 20 years as a writer, as an author. I published 3 books. I was raising 2 children. And I think most writers know, and most mothers know, how isolating both of those things can be. And I began just moonlighting at another independent bookstore one day a week just to get out of the house. And, because they paid me in books. I couldn't resist. And but over the course of 15 years, that relationship, and depending on what else I was writing at the time and how busy I was at the time, I might work there one day a week. At one point, I was working there 4 days a week, really, as their manager. And so I did know quite a bit about the whole business of in an independent bookstore. I think a lot of people have a big fantasy about what it's like to run a bookstore.
Yeah.
And those people sometimes get into trouble when they start one, and it isn't as straightforward as people think it's going to be. But I did know a lot about it before I started.
What's not straightforward about it?
Well, people think of it as sleepy, and I think the fantasy is that you will just be kind of sitting there. You can almost write like a quaint little maybe British movie in your head about a little bookshop somewhere on the coast with a quirky owner who's always reading a book except when an occasional customer walks in and interrupts them. And that's
Right.
what people think it's going to be like. It's actually, it's a very, very complicated, intricate business because we're dealing with a lot of different suppliers. We deal with, the 6 major, huge New York publishers, but then we, about probably at least 100, maybe 150 smaller publishers that we're dealing with individually. And if you think about, some of these publishers have 5,000 books on a list, and they do their lists 3 times a year. So we're constantly combing through all these lists because every single book in the store is hand-selected.
Wow.
And then we're trying to keep track of the books that have been there for a while and aren't selling because we need to do something about those. And then, of course, we're essentially also an event business because we do so many author events and literary events, so we're creating those.
Right.
And we're actually, it's a lot of detail. All the bookstore owners I know are kind of pulling their hair out most of the time because they're juggling so much detail from what are you going to do when, 500 people show up for the book signing to, oh, somebody special ordered this one book last week and you tried to get it from the publisher and the publisher didn't bother telling you that that book isn't in stock right now and they don't know when they're going to get it again. So now your customer is upset. So it's really from these details that are very small and individual, but really matter to people.
Yeah.
To the sort of large scale issues.
Well, it's some people think the fantasy of the sleepy store. I mean, you got to make it profitable.
You do have to make it profitable, and that's another challenge because the margin. I mean, it's very specific to this industry that the margin is not great, and we don't. We're sort of trapped between these two things where, Amazon can offer books at a discount because they're buying at a huge discount that we don't get.
Right.
And B, they don't need to make money on their books because they, at the beginning, were supported mainly by investment money, not by sales. So that on the one end, there they have people telling people that a book isn't worth the cover price of it. But on our side of it, since we can't afford to do that kind of discounting, and prices come pre-printed on the covers. So there's nothing we can do about the fact that maybe our rent is, more expensive than the rent of a bookstore that's in rural Wisconsin. Well, we can't mark our books up because that's true.
Right.
So we have a really fixed margin that we just have to deal with somehow.
Well, that's a question I didn't think of before, but why do books have their prices on them like that?
It's a tradition in the industry, and it's been going on for so long that now whenever the question comes up again, and I've been in rooms full of booksellers when the question comes up, and about half of booksellers don't want it any other way, and the other half would like to be able to price books. But it isn't, most bookstores, because of the way the industry has grown up, aren't set up to individually price a book. It would be a challenge for them if every single book had to be priced and labeled. So,
and you've got thousands of books.
Yep, and coming and going. So
you're really trying to sell your value as opposed to saying to somebody who wants to just buy it online for cheap. And part of that is the events that you do. And, I've had on Annie Coakley from downtown Evanston, and she was talking about the events that she's done there. And Ellen Blum-Barrett, she's been on, and she was talking about the events that you have. And, I mean, you're building a sense of community, I would think, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're in it because, authors love to talk about their books. Mm-hmm. And serious readers like to connect with those authors. And there aren't that many places where you can be in a room and hear an author talk about, why they wrote what they wrote, have a conversation with them about their writing process. So it's a very particular kind of community that we're trying to build, and it does go on to some extent in libraries.
Right.
But it's libraries and bookstores that build that kind of community.
What do you think sets you apart from a library, though?
Well, there's a big difference between borrowing a book and owning a book, and they aren't mutually exclusive. We collaborate a lot with the Evanston Public Library, and we have a lot of people who will tell us, they'll come in with a book that they got out of the library originally, and they'll either say, geez, I loved this book, or I really want to mark this up as I'm reading it, and I can't mark it up because it's a library copy. Or, with kids, it'll be like, my kids just want to read this book over and over and over again. So there's there's definitely a different role for owning a book as opposed to borrowing a book. And I feel, as somebody who grew up being taken to bookstores, when I was little and I got the Christmas money or the birthday money, I always saved it to go to a bookstore and buy books. For me, I have a lot of weird, eccentric interests in things that nobody else I know is interested in. And, books have always been a way where you can go get your own little universe and take it home with you and sort of own it. Nobody else, it's true that bookstores create community and bring people together, but it's also true that a book can be a very, very individual thing.
Sure.
Books can speak to you in a way that no people speak to you, and that's one of the real pleasures and I think values of a book.
Do you think that your experience as a writer influences how you do things in your store?
Yes, I do think a lot of things. I think that it's interesting because there are quite a few stores in America now that are owned by authors and writers. Mm-hmm. And I think that while we have a lot of people who will just kind of come into the store and look around, and then they'll say something about how, well, I don't really buy books, or I'm decluttering, which always sort of breaks my heart that anybody would label a book as a piece of clutter. But I do think that for people who are writers, people who are writers are always extremely attached to books as an object. Yeah. And it has something to do with, for most writers, books have been really deeply influential in making them who they are. And so books, you don't just read them the way you'd read an ebook and forget about it. An important part of owning the book is then you put it on the shelf, and then every time you see it, you think about what it meant to you. And, for a lot of books, every few years you pull it down and read it again and see if it's still offering you what it offered you in the first place. So I just think that, it's like anything else. It's like, well, the guy who has a store for running shoes is maybe a runner who's just a total geek about running. The same with skateboards. I'm not saying all bookstore owners are writers, but a writer is somebody who pretty much by definition is going to be super geeky about books and attached to the physical book.
Sure. Do you hate audiobooks and ebooks?
I don't hate audiobooks. I think they do have a place. For me, their place is long car rides. I've really,
right.
And you experience a book sort of differently, I think, when you listen to it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with ebooks either. I don't think there's anything wrong with ebooks, but there's definitely a different reading experience that goes with ebooks. Interestingly, I think, 6 or 7 years ago, they were predicting that by now 80% of reading would be electronic and 20% would be print. And what's happened is exactly the opposite.
Really?
Yeah, and they're finding that what's most successful as an ebook, for one thing, the genre books, so romances, science fiction, mystery, books where people tend to kind of read them fast and then just move on to the next one. So, tangibility isn't as much of an issue, and wanting to keep them on your shelf forever is not as much of an issue.
Yeah.
But books where you're really immersing in the thought and in the reading experience, people are clinging to the technology of the printed book as a very robust reading experience, a very robust technology.
Yeah, my wife's a reading specialist. She helps students learn how to read, and she loves reading. And yeah, she also has that very heavy, more so towards actual physical book. There's just something more to it. And even helping somebody learn how to read who may have dyslexia, it's easier to be able to do it with the book because there's a tactile piece to it as well.
And it speaks to multiple senses. You would be surprised how many people walk into the store and the first thing they say is, "Oh, I love how it smells in here." And it's like there's a specific smell that goes with paper and ink that people love. And a lot of people will open a book and just sniff it first because it smells like a book.
Mm-hmm. It's like going into a hardware store.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's something to it. And I mean, you talked about how Barnes & Noble and Borders came here, and obviously Borders isn't around anymore. I mean, why do you think people like to come to you as opposed to going to Barnes & Noble, which is bigger, and it's in the middle where you don't need to, it's not a speakeasy.
You don't need
books.
to know the secret of their location
right.
like you
secret.
do with us. No.
Yes.
No. So we had an early Yelper who called us a speakeasy for books because we're down an alley. So she said, you need to know the secret of the location, and then you can go in and get drunk on the books. So why do people come to us? There was a development. I do remember when the first Barnes & Noble store came to Evanston, and everybody was delighted. It was more books than anybody had ever seen in one place.
Right.
And Borders also. And for a long time, that worked. But then what started to happen, and I think a lot of this was due to Amazon coming along, and again, price undercutting everybody, was that you saw that the chain stores were disinvesting in their books, and they were starting to put their eggs in other baskets, such as their e-reader, which was not very successful, especially not compared to the Amazon one.
Right.
And there's a lot of merchandise, and there were CDs, and there were DVDs, and magazines. But you go in, and the book section kept shrinking and shrinking, and the book selection kept also shrinking because I think there was much more emphasis on things that were going to be bestsellers. They wanted to do volume.
Right.
And so, what we're finding, interestingly, is that we can't sell a bestseller to save our lives. And
No?
well, I think it's a combination that people do still go to chain stores to get those, or they get them, online because they're all discounted. But they come to us because they are looking for a deeper selection of books, a more interesting selection of books. We definitely have, for instance, in the cooking section, we have a huge, because I also have a background as a chef and as a food reporter, so the food section is very important to me. I'm going to pick out books that I think, not just the obvious, not just, Ottolenghi is selling well, but I want to have a really, really deep selection of books. I remember there was a book that came out on Azerbaijani cooking, and I hadn't seen a book on Azerbaijani cooking. It was an expensive book. It was like beautifully illustrated, and it had 3 separate recipes for horse hooves.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I thought, I just want to have this in my store because I don't know what customer's going to want this, but somebody's going to walk in here and feel the same way, like looking at this book that I feel looking at this book, like, oh my gosh, I knew nothing about this. And I want this book to be here for that one customer. So we had the book in the store for about 6 months before, indeed, someone who is a very recognized food historian who was in the store to do an event for her own book, saw that and just was over the moon delighted and bought it. And
wow.
So we're looking for that stuff. We're selecting for that stuff, not for the next, John Grisham or whatever.
Yeah, it's purpose driven in a personal way.
Yeah.
Do you ever think about opening up another location?
Well, that's a complicated question. So what everybody's struggling with everywhere, in Evanston definitely, but also all across the country, is rent.
Yeah.
A bookstore model is hard enough as it is, but rent on the main street, the reason we're not out on the main street right now is essentially because of rent. And everybody has trouble making that work.
Right.
So we we opened in the alley. I mean, it was expedient. It made sense. There was another bookstore moving out. So all of those things were expedient at the time. And of course, over the past 5 years, we've kind of grown into this location. So every time I think about either moving out or opening somewhere else, part of what I think about is, but we're so much about our space now. People do love our space. And so the question for me, out on a main street somewhere, we've actually been invited to open in a mall, but we're not a mall.
Weird.
We're not a mall store.
No.
The whole point of us is that we're not a mall store. So those are questions I think about, but I don't know where the future will lead us.
I mean, were you worried about it when they were talking about doing a development where you are?
Absolutely, and at that point, I thought maybe I wasn't going to have any choice. So I did do quite a bit of looking around, and
right.
That wasn't a happy situation. That would have been really bad for us.
Yeah, I think probably part of the reason why there was so much neighborhood opposition to it was because of your store.
Well, if you look at, if you want to talk about downtowns and the character of a downtown, if the business model of your downtown is that only big national chain stores that are doing, crazy amounts of business can afford to rent those spaces, then those are the only businesses you're going to have in your downtown. And if if there are little spaces like our alley where a bookstore and the Alley Gallery, which is a frame store and also is a gallery. Yeah. And, that's another business model that doesn't work at a very high rent location. So if you go ahead and destroy spaces like that do still manage to hang on in your downtown, you're going to destroy, it's like destroying an ecosystem. You're going to destroy the kinds of businesses that can only, make it work because they're in those spaces.
Right. It's like what Jane Jacobs wrote about, and how the highways went through and just, the middle of these towns and destroyed all these small stores and everything. And it destroyed the fabric of the neighborhood.
Yes. And I think, when we had that controversy over the development, there were people who just said, well, those businesses can move somewhere else. And I think that shows really no understanding of what small business economics looks like.
Right. Yeah, it's not just the fantasy.
No, right. It's you have to write the check to the landlord every month, and you write checks to a lot of other people too.
Right. I know it. And you've been around now for 5 years, right?
Yay!
That's awesome. And that's a pretty big accomplishment for an independent bookstore in this day and age. How long do bookstores usually last?
Well, it's interesting. In the Chicago area, we have some bookstores that just have showed incredible traction and survived. So what happened? There was a period when Barnes & Noble and Borders were duking it out everywhere, and then Amazon came along. And I think these numbers are right, but I think there had been about 5,000 independent stores in the country. And somewhere in the early 2000s, we were down to 1,500, maybe even 1,200. A lot of stores got driven out of business. But, in Chicago, we have Women and Children First, which just is celebrating their 40th anniversary. We have the Bookstall in Winnetka, and I believe they're at least 60 years old. We have Unabridged, which is decades old, down in Chicago, Seminary Co-op down in Hyde Park. These are bookstores that have been around for decades and, did survive what I sometimes refer to as the massacre of the independent bookstores. So in recent years, because Borders went away and because Barnes & Noble really did disinvest in the books, that has opened up some ground for indies to grow back. And there has been this indie bookstore renaissance is real. The numbers are now increasing again. But it's sort of touch and go. And I know I was somewhat alarmed a few months ago. The Samuel French bookstore in Los Angeles announced that they were closing. They were 90 years old.
Oh, wow.
And you would think, their LA is a wealthy, wealthy town, and they're a drama bookstore, and LA is sort of the drama capital of the United States. And what they said was, everybody comes in here and talks about how much they love our store, and then they go home and order books online. So,
do you find people looking on their phones when they're at your store?
Yes, all the time.
Do you despise that?
We do.
Do you tell them to stop?
We don't usually perform an intervention. We are aware that people are doing it. I will say that we also have people who are doing the reverse. We have people who come to us and show us the Amazon page for a book and say, I want to buy it from you. Mm-hmm. But definitely that goes on. It's called showrooming. It's like we're a showroom. Again, I think it's usually a matter of people just kind of not really thinking through what our business model must be. And the fact that as much as you love your cute indie local bookstore, if you are not spending your book dollars in it, then, it may not last. It's that simple.
Right.
It's so to me, because I have the food background and I watched in the food industry what happened when, Alice Waters and this idea of sustainable farming and farm to table and all of that took hold. That was a movement that started back in the 70s with this idea that how you spend your food dollar matters. And if you spent it at the food co-op buying whole wheat flour, that was a vote right there for non-industrial flour. And that idea took several decades to get traction, but in the last 10 years has completely revolutionized the food industry. The whole idea that farming needs to be sustainable and fish need to be sustainable, and you support that by buying those products and shopping at places that use those supply systems. So the same thing is really true in the book industry, but that consciousness hasn't happened yet. People really sort of look at it at the most simple level, which is, well, I can buy the exact same book from Amazon that I can buy from you, only I'll pay $4 less. And they don't think about, but if you keep doing that, then you aren't, bookstores will not exist anymore. You're standing here in my bookstore holding the book in your hand, and you probably wouldn't feel bad about going over to Starbucks and spending that other $4 on a latte or whatever. Like, how much does that $4 mean to you?
Right. If
the $4 is the extra money that we have to pay to keep our lights on and provide this cozy environment for you, at some level it's true that you get the same book from Amazon that you get from us, but you don't get the same package of being in the community from Amazon that you get from us.
Right. There's an experience. People buy experience. Mm-hmm. It's customer service. And I think another part of it is just keeping the money within the community.
Absolutely. That makes a big difference.
It's a huge difference. All your employees, you spend the money back in the community. It supports the schools in the community. It's everything. So I think people really need to take a holistic view of it. And, I interviewed Matt from the Talking Farm. Do you know that place?
No, I don't.
So in Skokie, there's a farm called the Talking Farm. It's off of Howard near McCormick, and I haven't released it. By the time I put this out, it'll be released. But they have they have the capacity to grow 60,000 pounds of produce a year. And they sell to a bunch of restaurants in the area. They sell at the farmers market in Skokie and Evanston, and they bring in a lot of school groups to teach them about it. But it's all about within the community. He even said we don't even deliver to North Evanston because it's it's just too far.
Yep.
So it's keeping it like you're saying about food, same kind of thing. With books or anything that we do.
Yeah, I mean, there have been huge gains. If you look at agriculture, yeah, there have been huge gains in the amount of food we can produce by using these huge scale farming methods and by using these fertilizers and by using these new strains of grain. But, we're now starting to struggle with all of the unintended consequences of all of those things, like people having terrible food allergies and poisons in the environment. And, I think that's also comparable to what's going on in the book industry. You get your cheap book, but there's a lot going on under the surface of you're also supporting this culture that is undermining local life, undermining local taxes. Every time Amazon has another, contest to see who's going to host their local headquarters, there's all this stuff about their tax breaks. Like, we're not getting tax breaks. We're a small business that pays all of our taxes and is really embedded in our community. And we don't invade your privacy. Amazon, part of what Amazon is also making money on is collecting data about you every time you buy stuff. Mm-hmm. Another thing we're not doing. So I just really think that there is, sometimes I also compare it to the coral reefs, and that they're dying, but they're out of sight, and so no one is aware of what's going on there. And I feel like there is a sort of a climate change that's going on beneath the surface of Amazon that is way more profound in terms of the consequences to our society than anybody really thinks about.
Yeah. Well, it's so convenient and easy that's why everybody does it. I mean, I'm totally guilty of it, but I think it's important to bring consciousness to it, So, I mean, you have a great store and everything, and you're open every day, or how, can people also buy online from you if they wanted to?
They can, and I think people don't even realize that, but yeah, we're open 7 days a week, 10 to 6. We have an online store. That we have a great website. Actually, if you go on the website and search for a book you're looking for, the website will either tell you it's on our store, on our shelves now, or that we can get it. And what you're getting access to when you go on the website is the whole, basically the whole warehouse that we order from when we special order a book in the store anyway. So you're getting access to millions of titles because obviously we aren't a giant warehouse.
Right.
But we can get a lot of stuff. We special order for people all the time, and there's a lot of stuff we can get within a day or two.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. This morning, earlier, I interviewed the mayor of Skokie, mm-hmm. and he has a book that came out recently, and I just wanted to check if maybe I left it with the documents from him, but I wanted to see if you guys sold it, and you do. So, I mean, it's like everything you can get from your store.
Well, eventually.
A lot, quite a bit.
Stuff. I mean, really what we can't get, so, of course, the space used to be an antiquarian and out-of-print bookstore, and we really don't do. We do used books. We focus on more recent used books.
Do you buy them?
We do.
Okay.
We buy them for store credit, but then you can use that credit on anything in the store. So we have certain guidelines for what we're looking for, and it tends to be a more recent book that we would be selling in the store anyway, but that when we can offer a cheaper version because it's used, we think that's great for especially students and old people who are on any kind of a budget. And we also offer what's called remainder books, which are when publishers have overstock stuff, they get rid of it a little more cheaply than the new stuff. So then we can offer those as bargain books. So we do try to have a range of, if you're looking for a bargain, we have that. We're not just all the new full-price books.
That's good to know. And the events that you have, I mean, anybody can come to them, right? Depending on what it is.
They're almost always free and open to the public. Occasionally, if there's going to be an author where there's just going to be too much demand, we would either require the sale of a book in order to get into the event, or we would have to limit, attendance. So, for instance, we did this wonderful event with Ron Stallworth, who wrote the memoir Black Klansman that the movie was based on. And we just asked people to RSVP because we wanted to know how many people were coming, and within 24 hours, we were way overbooked.
Oh my
So
God.
we had to cut that off. And we ended up doing actually a live Facebook broadcast of the interview, which was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But and then we learned that we can cram 120 people into the store, basically seated. So, but most of what we do is free and open.
That's great. And where can people find you online and on social media?
So we're at www.bookendsandbeginnings.com. That's the website. So the events are always on the website. You can order on the website. We have a very active Facebook page with all kinds, sometimes we're now doing little author interviews. So when an author visits the store, if you didn't get a chance to come meet them, we're getting little 1-minute kind of elevator talks about them introducing their books. And we sort of have we are on Instagram. We don't tweet. I think that we have a complicated relationship to social media. I mean, it's just sort of a fact of life in the current world. You can't not have social media.
Right.
I do worry that people spending way too much time on social media is one reason people aren't reading as much as
Totally
they should be.
Yeah.
So we try not to go overboard, and we would encourage you. We do have Wi-Fi in the store, but it's bad Wi-Fi, which is sort of it's sort of an on-purpose decision that we made, that we didn't want to encourage people to come in the store and be online. The whole
What's the point?
The point of coming in the store is to look at the books and read the books. And if you want to be on Wi-Fi, don't
Go somewhere else.
Go somewhere else. So. Yeah, we want you to read, and we really want you to, I think, a lot of people come in with a list that they have.
Yeah.
And we feel like part of the joy of being in a bookstore. I mean, if you have a list, it's, of course, much easier always to just go online and order whatever is on your list. But part of the pleasure of being in a bookstore is not having an agenda. And, you look for the book that you're looking for, and next to it is this other book that looks really cool. Mm-hmm. Or you don't find the book you were looking for, but the spot where you're looking is full of other stuff. So that's part of the experience that we offer, this serendipity, this, just tune out the outside world for a little while and focus on, what speaks to you. And especially with kids, that's a great thing. We have a great kids section. Including these 2 giant sheep, stuffed sheep that kids are just completely gravitate to. So they'll just pick a book out and they'll sit down on a sheep and sit there and read. And it's just the most wonderful sight. And I hope, we're helping to lay down a lifelong love of books that way.
Yeah, you make a great experience. And also the physical location, where can people how do you find you?
Well, you have to know the secret of the location. So there's a wonderful alley that runs from Sherman Avenue to Benson Avenue. And that would be just a little bit north of Church Street. But basically you go to Seville Flowers, which is on Sherman Avenue, and that's where you see the secret alley. And you go down the secret alley, and you can't miss us.
Right, and there's a sign, too. So
there is a sign. Yeah, it's not like platform, the platform in Harry Potter where you, actually have
That would be amazing if you did that.
There's a very strong chance that if you find the alley, you're going to see the bookstore.
Yeah, no, it's not so secret. Everybody should know about it. Well, Nina, this was a pleasure to have you on. I think we learned a lot about your store and just about independent bookstores in general, and why people should support them, support you, and buy a lot of books.
I agree. And, not just us, but there are other... The independent bookstores of Chicago are generally pretty good friends. All the owners know each other, and we really believe that an independent bookstore customer would enjoy any of our stores and should enjoy all of our stores. So, I definitely want you to come into Bookends and Beginnings and buy a lot of books, but I also want you to check out all the other great independent stores around here.
That's good advice. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and don't forget to subscribe. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to this latest episode of Inside the Skev. I hope you enjoyed it. Just remember to subscribe, and if you need any assistance for your real estate needs in the Chicagoland area, or specifically Skokie, Evanston, or Skevinston, feel free to reach out to me. I am a realtor at Dreamtown Realty in Evanston. You can email me at aaron@skevinston.com or go to my website, aaronmasliansky.com. Thanks so much for listening.